friendly crowd. The president speaks to Catholic health care providers who support Obamacare. Tough questions. Lawmakers want to know why airport security screeners aren't getting the job done. More than meets the eye. Investigators search for those who helped two convicted killers escape from prison. And in God's image, Pope Francis says differences between men and women are for communion and creation. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 9th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. President Obama declares his 5-year-old health care law is firmly established as the reality of health care in America. He spoke to Catholic health providers ahead of a Supreme Court ruling that could undermine Obamacare. Chief Correspondent, White House Correspondent Suzanne LaFranchi has more.
Well, Brian, the president defended his signature health care overhaul, speaking to the Catholic Health Association conference here in Washington. The CHA leadership endorsed Obama's so-called accommodation on the H.H.S. mandate, opposing Catholic bishops on that issue. The mandate requires employers to provide coverage of birth control, sterilization, and abortion-causing drugs to their employees.
We would not have succeeded had it not been for you.
Obama repeatedly praised the president of CHA, Sister Carol Keenan, for her tireless work in helping the Affordable Care Act become reality.
And so after a century of talk, after decades of trying, after a year of sustained debate, we finally made health care reform a reality here in America.
But critics take issue with the H.H.S. mandate, part of Obamacare, that provides for abortion-inducing drugs.
It goes against the common humanity of the unborn, and it doesn't treat them with any dignity or respect and bona fide care, nor does it actually respect or treat with care actual women.
Yesterday, Obama took a jab at the Supreme Court for even considering the case.
This should be an easy case. Frankly, it probably shouldn't even been taken up.
The White House says nearly 6.5 million Americans could lose coverage if the Supreme Court rules that people enrolled through the federal site weren't eligible for the subsidies.
It seems so cynical to want to take coverage away from millions of people, to take care away from the people who need it the most.
Critics say Obama is attempting to bully the Supreme Court. In a statement, Carrie Severino, chief counsel of the Judicial Crisis Network, said the president's moral case boils down to this: if you like your morals, you can keep your morals. There's nothing moral about gutting the Constitution or forcing people to violate their deeply held religious convictions. Republican leaders say Obamacare has resulted in double-digit premium increases for some families. A Supreme Court ruling is expected by the end of this month. Brian?
Suzanne LaFranchi at the White House. Thanks, Suzanne. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. A federal appeals court today upholds key parts of a strict pro-life law in Texas. It requires that abortion providers meet hospital-level operating standards. Republican Governor Greg Abbott says the standards protect women's health. That law will likely close most of that state's abortion clinics. Opponents are expected to now take their case to the Supreme Court. Jeanne Mancini, president of March for Life, is joining us. Do you see today's court ruling in New Orleans on this Texas case as a major pro-life victory?
Oh, you bet. It's a pro-life victory and a victory for women's health. I mean, essentially what this is doing is it's having clinics held to the same standards as other outpatient surgery facilities in the state of Texas. So let's face it, abortion is a deeply invasive, serious procedure. Often there are side effects and complications, so this is good. This is good for everyone.
So we're not talking about the levels of a surgery suite in a hospital, though, are we?
Right. We're talking about ambulatory facilities, essentially. And so this is a great step, because up until now, these kinds of clinics have been have been held to standards like veterinary clinics or beauty parlors. So
shocking.
Right. I mean, this is a serious surgery, a deeply invasive surgery. So of course they should be held to the standards of other surgical facilities, outpatient facilities.
So if this law survives the Supreme Court, could you see other states going the same route?
Absolutely, and we have seen many states going the same route, because after the Gosnell story broke a couple of years ago in Philadelphia, you'll remember the terrible clinic situation there, it was recognized that around the country, most states we're not holding abortion clinics at the level that they should be held at. So many states then, because of women's health, pass these very good common sense laws. That's what happened in Texas, and then they've gone back and forth, but today we've seen a major victory.
We also had a recent AP survey that shows that the rate of abortion is on decline, around 12% nationally. Some states that aggressively go after abortion and I guess have aggressive laws are as much as 15%. What do you make of that? That's certainly good news.
Well, it is great news, and we're very, very excited, but it's important to have an element of caution simply because states are not required to report their abortions, essentially. And so this is all voluntary. It's missing a lot of important information and data, but we can still take this in a very positive way. It would be better if the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and just the U.S. government in general required states to report these kinds of things, but we're moving in a very, very good direction.
Yeah, I was shocked that there isn't some kind of a requirement. Some states just didn't report. There was another statistic in that study that said that almost a quarter of abortions are now done with the RU-486 drug,
right, and
which
that's on the
really
rise.
is concerning.
It is concerning. The medical abortion, chemical abortion, RU-486 is actually much more dangerous for women than surgical abortion, believe it or not. And this has been shown, I'm stumbling over my words tonight, shown in a number of different studies, both physiologically and psychologically, but the abortionist can be removed from the actual physical situation that the woman is in. She can do it over a computer, over telemed, so it's on the increase because they need less abortionists to do this, even though it's more dangerous for women, and really they have less oversight with chemical abortion.
So this data that was gathered in this survey certainly is encouraging in some ways. How can the pro-life movement use this to further the overall goal of ending abortion in the United States?
Well, my perspective on abortion is that it's just so important to bring it into the light. The more we show it for what it is, the more people become convinced about the horrific nature of abortion. And I think that's probably what we're seeing with these decreases. So ultrasounds are becoming more and more prevalent with some of the laws that have been passed. A beautiful quote I heard from Charmaine Yost, president of AUL, was that the first picture that many moms are seeing of their baby is that beautiful ultrasound. So this emphasizes the humanity of the child. So all of these things impact public opinion in the United States, and we're becoming more and more a culture of life. Days like today show that.
I held a 5.5-pound baby, my youngest granddaughter, in my arms. She was a month premature. I think if people were to be able to experience that, abortion would be over.
I completely agree.
Life is a gift.
It is a gift.
Thanks. Jeanne Mancini with March for Life. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Homeland Security officials answer some tough questions about TSA oversight today. The Senate hearing comes after an audit suggests the TSA needs to do a better job vetting airport security workers. Testing shows more than 70 people with terror-related category codes were not properly identified. Apparently, the TSA is not authorized to receive all terror-related information. Former House Speaker Dennis Hastert pleads not guilty to charges in a federal hush money case. He allegedly paid $3.5 million to someone he knew during his time as a high school teacher and coach in Illinois. A person familiar with the allegations says those payments were intended to conceal claims that Hastert molested someone decades ago. The judge is considering conditions for Hastert's pretrial release. If convicted, he faces a maximum 5-year sentence on each of the 2 counts. Well, it could take 3 to 5 years, if not longer, for Iraq to defeat the Islamic State. That statement comes from an Obama administration official. Just yesterday, the president acknowledged himself there's no complete strategy for training Iraqi security forces to fight ISIS. He said Iraq's government is having trouble recruiting soldiers. After last month's ISIS siege of Ramadi, U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter blamed Iraq's military for a lack of will to fight. As police and U.S. Marshals search for 2 escaped murderers, a separate probe is underway. Investigators want to know who from the outside may have helped the prisoners escape. Jason Calvi reports.
Investigators believe Richard, Matt, and David Sweat may have had help escaping from a maximum security prison. The question is, help from whom?
We're just disgusted that someone would actually help them do what they did to get out. I can't believe someone would actually stoop that low.
A former inmate at the Clinton Correctional Facility says even through programs inside the prison, there's no other way the pair could have gotten the power tools necessary to cut through walls and pipes to escape.
Even if you're an electrician or if you're a plumber, they give you a toolbox. When you leave the shop, you have to come back with that stuff. So if anything ever come up missing, they'll shut everybody down who was in that program. Investigators questioned a prison employee, a woman who worked with Matt and Sweat tailoring clothing at the prison. A law enforcement source briefed on the investigation says the woman knows the two escapees very well. She has not been charged or arrested. The escape wasn't a first for Richard Matt. He broke out of jail back in 1986, spending 4 days on the run before being recaptured. With two convicted murderers now free, officials worry what they might do to stay free.
They're likely that they could do a home invasion to steal a car, a hijacking. They could hold a family hostage, kill them in order to get money, weapons, cars. All of those are concerns of the police.
Despite a manhunt involving hundreds of people and a $100,000 reward, Matt and Sweat are still on the loose. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Jason. And Pope Francis encourages us to get up every time we fall into sin.
È vero, c'è il peccato ci fa cadere.
The Holy Father saying sin makes us fall down, but we have God's strength to get up again and continue our journey. His comments came during his homily at morning Mass at Casa Santa Marta, where he lives. The Vatican will soon open a homeless shelter. The Pope's delegate for works of charity tells an Italian news agency the dormitory will be located close to St. Peter's Square. The 30-bed facility will be managed by volunteers and reportedly used only as a night shelter. U.S. bishops gather in St. Louis this week for their spring General Assembly. We have a team there. Catherine Zeltner sets the stage for us tonight. Catherine?
Brian, there is no mistaking that I'm in downtown St. Louis with the signature Gateway Arch right behind me here. The U.S. bishops only meet all together twice a year. They're here this week for their spring session in the city that's called the Rome of the West. Two important topics the bishops will address this week: the Synod on the Family and the Pope's visit to the U.S. in September. Philadelphia's Archbishop Charles Chaput is expected to brief the bishops on the World's Meeting of Families and the Pope's participation in it. Another story we're watching is the bishop's discussion on the papal encyclical on the environment. That teaching document will be released next week. It's attracting a lot of attention from all camps inside and outside the church. This will be the last full meeting of American bishops before the papal visit in the fall and October's Synod on the Family. Some journalists who are here say they don't usually come to the June meeting, but this one is too important to miss. Brian?
Catherine, we look forward to your reports this week. Thank you. Coming up, it was 2 years ago today that NSA contractor Edward Snowden leaked secrets about mass spying. And the photographer who snapped this iconic image of the Napalm Girl 43 years ago returns to Vietnam. Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its taste, with what can it be seasoned?" A quote from today's Gospel, St. Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, it's just over a year since India's Prime Minister took office. Many say he is moving the country in the right direction, but others claim he's not doing enough to protect religious minorities, including Christians. Wyatt Goolsby has more.
Today in Washington, fans and critics weigh in on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Former ambassador and special envoy Sukhdev Muni agrees with many who say Modi has done well in boosting his country's status around the world, but he says Modi hasn't done enough to improve India's economy. In the past year, Christians in India have called for Modi to take a stronger stance against radical Hindus who are accused of vandalizing churches and attacking clergy members.
He explicitly is not saying anything to offend the minorities, either Christian or Muslim or anybody else. The problem is, as you mentioned, of the radical Hindus. Now, the complaint against Mr. Modi is that he is not doing enough to contain them. And I guess he cannot, or he is being very cautious because they are the vote getters.
Muni says unless the Prime Minister stands up to the radical Hindus who persecute religious minorities, the issue will continue to haunt the country for years to come. Christians only make up less than 3% of India's population of 1.2 billion. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. We'll have more of that interview with the former ambassador and the challenges facing Christians in India later this week here on EWTN News Nightly. It was 2 years ago today, Edward Snowden revealed that he was the main source of National Security Agency leaks. That former NSA contractor now lives in Russia to avoid criminal charges here in the U.S. His leaks revealed the NSA secretly mined data from 9 of the world's top internet companies. The top secret PRISM program collected intelligence about foreign threats. The report showed the surveillance was occurring without individual warrants. A single photograph captured the world's attention and may have changed the course of history. It's one of the enduring images from the Vietnam War. AP photographer Nick Ut's Pulitzer Prize-winning shot of Kim Phuc and other terrified children running after being hit by a napalm bomb.
Unit 72, when the Kim Phuc and our children, they play outside, right here. They play outside the street right here. When Kim looked up the sky, she saw the bomb. She said, all the children running, but too late. She got hit the bomb, and it burned all her clothes.
Ut returned to the site of the photograph on Monday, 43 years to the day later. His image, known as Napalm Girl, helped crystallize the debate America had been having for more than half a decade about the war. But the image did not appear on newspapers until many hours later. On his latest trip, Ut was equipped with an iPhone and instantaneously uploaded images to the AP Images Instagram account.
It's more easy, like 43 years ago. iPhone, snapshots, very fast, and just send right there. Anywhere in the world, minutes. When the old days to film, I had to go back to Saigon, film the love. I mean, way too long for a story.
Ut ended up posting 6 images on Instagram, including one of Ho Van Bon, Kim Phuc's cousin, and the boy to her left in the 1972 photo. Up next, the Catholic Church grows in a lopsided pattern worldwide. And Pope Francis says there's a reason men and women are different. The very breath of God breathes within us, for we are his living temple. That's a Tuesday tip from our foundress, Mother Angelica. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. A recent study shows the number of Catholics worldwide has grown by 57% since 1980. The report by Georgetown University's Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, or CARA, compiled data from 1980 to 2012. The numbers, however, vary greatly by the regions in the world. In Europe, the Catholic population has grown by just 6%, but in Africa, it's up by 238%. The number of parishes around the world also on the rise, except, of course, in Europe. And the greatest growth in the number of priests is happening in Africa and Asia. Both continents have seen the number of priests more than double. Mark Gray is the author of this report, did much of the research involved. Why the huge disparity between Africa and Europe in the growth of the Catholic population?
It's really a story about fertility, and Europe has had falling fertility rates, and they're below replacement rates, so the average number of children per woman has fallen below 2. And it's also the case that really the population only grows through immigration now. There's some countries where deaths outnumber births. Whereas in Africa, fertility is also falling, but it's still well above replacement rates, and life expectancy is increasing, which means rapid population growth that we expect to continue throughout this century. Catholics, being a part of that population, are growing.
Does it have any, is there any significance to economic factors where people are doing relatively well? They may not need the church so much, where in Africa, I think they may realize that they need God more. Does that enter into this picture at all?
It's possible. It's also the case that there's a demographic linkage there as well. And in more well-off countries, people tend to have smaller families than in developing countries.
So based on this research, let's go back to Europe specifically. What do you see as the future of the church in Europe?
The population will continue to be sizable. There's still not enough priests likely in Europe to deal with the population through mid-century, but it will likely decline. There'll be fewer Catholics in 2050 than in 2010. And immigration will bring more non-Catholics, making the Catholic population a smaller share of the European population.
So I'm sure there are many Catholics who are really entrenched in the church, receiving the sacraments, going to Mass, yet the research shows that sacramental practice is waning in the Americas. Do you know why that is?
Different reasons in different places. So in parts of Latin America, there are still too few parishes given the size of the population. There's less of a concern about shortage of priests there. So it appears that some people delay sacramental practice, and sometimes when they delay, they don't make it to First Communion or confirmation, or they choose not to marry in the church. Whereas in North America, it appears to be more something to do with people choosing to be members of brick and mortar institutions less. So the church isn't alone here. There are all kinds of institutions affected by this, more wrapped up in kind of a world of digital content, spending more time with that. And they end up going to church less and doing lots of sacramental activities that in the past were done frequently less often.
So what does that mean for the future of the church in the Americas? Do we see a church that's really changing, where people are leaning more on a digital presence versus a real presence?
Well, as we point out in the study, there's not a lot you can do online in terms of being Catholic. Sacramental practice is centered in a parish, so it is a very challenging future. Popular culture is a barrier in some respects to frequent sacramental practice.
Well, we need priests for sacraments. And in Asia, I guess the number of priests has just increased incredibly.
It is, both in Africa and in Asia, but Asia definitely stands out across the board in terms of increasing, in terms of population, sacramental practice, vocations. It's still a relatively small percentage of the population, but Asia has a very large population overall. So it's, in terms of Catholics within the church, it's an important place to look for the future of the church.
Well, I noticed Pope Francis has put a lot of emphasis on Asia in his trips. Could we see Asia in 50 to 100 years as the most Catholic place in the world?
Not in terms of total population, but in terms of all those other indicators, in terms of vibrancy in the church, it definitely looks like that's where the most positive trends are occurring.
And certainly in Africa, with the increases there, you would think that Africa and the church in Africa would become much more of a player in the overall universal church.
That is true. The challenge there, though, really is also population's increasing so quickly that it's difficult to build enough parishes. So there's a challenge there that's not similar to what people face in Asia or Latin America.
Yeah, the Catholics need to be served, certainly. Mark Gray with Georgetown University's CARA program. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Interesting study. Pope Francis calls on Puerto Rican bishops to defend the sacrament of marriage. He calls it one of Latin America's most important treasures. The Holy Father says complementarity between a man and a woman is being questioned by the so-called gender ideology. He says this is being done in the name of a freer and more just society. Francis adds the differences between men and women are communion and generation, always in the image and likeness of God. Well, two sisters from the Maris religious order are counting their blessings tonight. They were trapped in a hot elevator in Rome all weekend after a power outage on Friday. Nobody heard their cries for help until a cleaner arrived on Monday morning. News reports say the sisters were treated for dehydration and said they passed the time praying. That's a good way to pass time. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. On this 9th day of June, the month of the Sacred Heart, we leave you with this brief visit to Rome's Basilica of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Good night and God bless you.